because I think it's a really interesting angle that that iwi, because we've always talked about, even people who are trying to have a crack at it, they're like, no, so they can go speak to the king about it. It's between the crown. It's like, obviously it's been passed on, and responsible has been given to the crown in New Zealand. But actually, people of the detractors of iwi issues and treaty issues have been saying, why don't you go talk to king? Guess what? They did.
To other news, and Māori leaders have written a rare open letter to King Charles calling for an intervention as tensions continue over government policy. The National Iwi Chairs Forum asks the King to ensure the government does not diminish the Crown's honour in relation to the Treaty of Waitangi. For more on this, let's go live to political editor Mikey Sherman. You've read the letter, Mikey. What more can you tell us?
Yes, that's right. One News obtained a copy of this letter late this afternoon. It's signed by more than 500 Māori leaders from across the country. It begins by acknowledging the recent death of the late Māori King Tuheitia and the fondness that King Charles had for him. But then it goes on to say, we wish to raise a constitutional matter outlining the promises made under the Treaty of Waitangi, agreed to by Queen Victoria in 1840.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Really interesting. And if you know anything about the King Bro, he is someone who the ecology matters, Indigenous rights matters. He is down that path. Too much for some people, more conservative people in the world. So really interesting.
It says, your new New Zealand coalition government has promised to attack Te Treaty of Waitangi and the rights of Māori, saying the government's legislative program unilaterally redefines the meaning of rangatiratanga, gives the state greater powers to take away Māori children and puts Māori land and seabed at risk through mining. The list goes on. Now, iwi leaders then request an intervention, asking King Charles to remind the coalition government to act with respect.
Really interesting. Honestly, really interesting. Our Governor General is the head of state, pretty much just an arbitrary kind of figure, or a ceremonial kind of figure, but in truth, really interesting.
And responsibly to act as an honourable partner on his behalf. Now, I spoke to one of the iwi leaders who signed this letter. Here's what he had to say.
Letter that was submitted to King Charles this week equally was to remind our treaty partner of our obligations to each other and to the promise made by our ancestors.
Okay, Mikey, any reaction from the government yet?
Well, One News reached out to the Prime Minister's office for comment. We received a statement back from Māori Development Minister Tama Pōtaka, who says while we don't always agree on everything, the government remains committed to working with iwi and Māori to help achieve shared interests. Now, this letter has already made headlines over in the UK. The media outlet The Guardian has reported on it. Iwi chairs say they do expect to raise this letter with government ministers directly. We can expect that should take place in meetings, if not at the beginning of the political year at Rātana, and then, of course, at Waitangi.
Tēnā koe, Mikey. Thank you very much.
Interesting, Chewie. I just think it's a really interesting thing to do. It's almost like they've gone to grandpa, like granddad, who normally lets his kids and stuff just get on with life, but they've gone to granddad and gone, granddad, and I'm not saying that because of his age, but the one that's above, like granddad, mum and dad, whatever, they're just not following the rules that great-great-great-grandma put in place. Can you help a brother out? I'm really intrigued by it.
It's an interesting thing. I don't know if I think anything will happen for it, but
I don't think it will. I don't think King Charles will do anything, but it's a really interesting point.
I want something to happen from it, though.
Well,
can you imagine Luxon trying to answer a statement that the king puts out? Like, how would he field that, apart from saying, well, look, what I'd say to you is King Charles doesn't know what he's talking about, fight me.
Yeah, I don't think anything will happen, because I think King Charles, the monarchy in general, are pretty much just figureheads now. And yet, someone's put in the chat, he's dealing with cancer. Did you hear what Trump did this week? Trump basically outed he had very bad cancer. Hadn't been made public yet, and Trump was like, he's dealing with very bad cancer. It's truth. There's a question in here. I think it was the super chat from Mr. Arvids. Yeah. How does this work with Dominion Day, like you've mentioned? So I've talked about Dominion Day a couple of times. It was when New Zealand stopped being a colony and became a dominion. And when we're a dominion, it means the crown, the parliament here has taken on the responsibilities of what the crown used to be, the royalty used to be. Here's the actual, I'll read it out to you if you want. I highlighted it there. 100 years ago, yada, 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 1907, 26 September, New Zealand became a dominion. In 1907, following a debate in the House, New Zealand Parliament asked Britain that New Zealand's status be changed from colony to dominion. A proclamation was issued that New Zealand would become a dominion with effect from 26 September 1907. The change of status had no constitutional effect, but it did. It was seen as a very significant symbolic step towards nationhood. The day was a one-off public holiday and buildings, yada, 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 yada. So it basically means, in theory or in practice, New Zealand is its own nation. And if it's its own nation, those things that used to be responsible of the monarch is now responsible of the monarch's representative, which is the Crown in New Zealand, the government. So yeah. I think it's really interesting. And the thing about it that is more interesting as well is I don't think Charles is going to come out, because I don't think they do that. I think they're very careful about getting involved in politics, but international media is picking up on it. I think that's very interesting as well. If nothing else, it's got, people in the UK talking about it. Oh, what about our little, siblings, our little cousins in the bottom of the world, the Antipodeans? What's happening down there? What are these bullies doing? It's interesting.
Absolutely. And something that the Seymour has shown, he was not happy with the amount of international attention that was directed our way from Hana's haka. So this is just really hammering that nail.